The era we are living in today is a dream come true. Walt Disney. Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to Dis-connected, an unofficial Disney podcast of magical proportions. I'm Whit Laxton, your Disney enthusiast host, and coming up, they start becoming B movies in a sense that they're not like that A level of masterpieces that the Walt Disney Animation Company was making before. Our journey through the history of Disney animation continues with a special Dis-cussion on the era known as the Bronze Age.
Awkward transitional period following Walt's death.
This is Disney Animation History, the Bronze Age. Hey guys, what's up? It's Whit, back for another episode of Dis-connected, along with my friend and fellow Disney enthusiast, Katie Carter, who is joining me via Skype. Hey, Katie.
Hey, Whit.
Hello. So we are continuing our series on the history of Disney animation today. We have talked about the Golden Age, the Silver Age, so it is time to discuss the Bronze Age, called Bronze Age for a reason, not the most exciting. This is actually take 2 though, because we recorded this earlier and had some tech issues, and now we're having to re-record. That's okay though, Katie, because hopefully I think, we'll remain positive and assume that this will be even better than the first time we recorded it. How about that?
Right. Sounds good.
Yeah. But, the Bronze Age, kind of an interesting time in Disney animation history. 1970 to 1988, it was a transitional time for the animation department as far as the animators. It was a transitional time for the Walt Disney Company as far as the administrative, people who were in power. And yeah, it was also just a time when the animation took on a different look. They used that Xerox process that we talked about with 101 Dalmatians in the last episode. So the animation didn't look quite as clean, but some fun movies in here, although maybe not the most memorable or impactful in animation history. But anyway, we will get started. We will jump into this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So this era starts with 1970, The Aristocats. That movie was released on December 24th, Christmas Eve of 1970. And yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about the story of The Aristocats?
Sure. So The Aristocats is set in Paris, I guess, turn of the century era. And it's about this family of cats. You have the mother, Duchess, and her 3 kittens, and they live with this wealthy older woman and her butler. And the butler believes that he will be receiving the woman's inheritance when she dies, but actually she's going to leave it to the cats. So he's upset about that, so he kidnaps the cats and abandons them in the middle of nowhere and, gets them out of the picture. So then these cats need to find their way home, and they, meet some other characters along the way, most notably an alley cat called Thomas O'Malley, who's, much more street smart and all of that. So he helps them find their way home and put that butler in his place.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it's a fun movie, and this was the last film. There's a lot of great music in it, and this was actually the last animated film that the Sherman Brothers wrote music for. But you've got the awesome song "Everybody Wants to Be a Cat." You've also got the Scale and Arpeggios song, which I really enjoy. I'm not a cat person. I'm a dog person. But I still enjoy the Aristocats.
Yeah. It's a fun movie. It does remind me a lot of Lady and the Tramp as far as the plot in some ways. And I do like that movie better. But this one's still fun. Great music, great animation, fun characters, great voice cast. You have Phil Harris, who had just done Baloo for the Jungle Book, returning for this one. And he voices Thomas O'Malley. And Eva Gabor voices Duchess, and she went on later to do Bianca in both of the Rescuers movies. Scatman Crothers as Scat Cat. Sterling Holloway, who's a Disney regular, pops up as the mouse who's friends with the cats. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
And so this was really sort of the first movie that the company did without Walt, and it was the last movie
Yeah.
that he had approved
Right.
to be done. So for their first time out without Walt's help and everything, not too bad,
Yeah.
not too shabby. But as we continue talking, it becomes noticeable that these movies, they start becoming B movies in a sense that they're not like that A level of masterpieces that the Walt Disney Animation Company was making before. And this would be one of those, I would say, for the B movie, but still really fun. And I always enjoyed this movie as a kid. I loved the song "Everybody Wants to Be a Cat." And I love the character of Marie. I think she is so fun and so sassy. So one of the little kittens there.
I also enjoy it. It's one that it's never been like an absolute favorite, but I do really enjoy it.
Aristocrats, Aristocats. So that's the play on words. So is this based on anything? I'm not sure.
Actually, it does sound like it's an original script. Began as an original script. It was initially going to be aired on TV as part of the Wonderful World of Color. And then I guess Disney, since Disney was, involved with it a little bit before he passed away, said, hey, this would work better as a feature. So then he gave it the go-ahead to be their next feature film.
That's good that they wound up doing that
Yeah.
with sort of being his last little approved project there for the animation department. So that was 1970, and then 1973 brought us Walt Disney Animation's take on Robin Hood.
Yeah, so this one is, of course, based on the classic story of Robin Hood, and it's a pretty straightforward adaptation of it, I feel like, except for the fact that they are all animal characters instead of human characters. Robin Hood is a fox, so is Maid Marian. Little John is a bear. The sheriff of Nottingham is a wolf. Yeah, so it's anthropomorphic characters. All the animals kind of represent the personalities of the characters. So you've got like the sly fox with Robin Hood, Mean Wolf as the villain with the sheriff there. Little John's kind of a little bit of comic relief, I guess. So he's, big silly bear. But yeah, it's a good one, a good little adventure story.
Robin Hood's kind of follows the journey of him, being a wanted outlaw and steals from the rich to feed the poor. In the process, helping the poor folk of Nottingham and falling in love with Maid Marian and all that. So, and then outwitting Prince John, which is not that big of a task, really. But,
He's a little silly for a villain, I feel like. But
oodalolly, golly, what a day. Phil Harris returned to voice Little John, so that was like 3 in a row there: Jungle Book, Aristocats, and Little John. And then Brian Bedford, who was the voice of Robin Hood, actually just recently passed away this year, so that was sad to hear about. But anybody else in the cast?
I know Pat Buttram is in there as the Sheriff of Nottingham, and he's one who pops up in Disney films a lot, usually as a supporting character. But he's in there, and Peter Ustinov, who's a big name, voices Prince John and King Richard. And I think those are kind of the big names.
Right. Some fun little songs in this movie as well. I mentioned the Oodalolly Golly What a Day song. Also a fun whistle tune at the beginning of the movie as the opening credits start, and there's a little bit of narration in there from the rooster character. And then there's a song called Love in the movie that was nominated for an Academy Award. That's a really beautiful song. I know there was a little bit of controversy with this movie. If you want to talk about the recycling of animation.
Yeah, so this movie's been called out by a lot of people for reusing a lot of sequences from previous Disney movies, like Snow White, Jungle Book. There are parts where if you compare them side by side, scenes from Robin Hood and scenes from those older movies, the animation is basically identical. So they reused a lot there, which really cut down on time and production costs. I think that's really why they did it, especially with this movie and the studio still being in this kind of awkward transitional period following Walt's death.
Yeah, they used some of the Aristocats, Everybody Wants to Be a Cat stuff too. And that's during the scene, the dancing. Prince John should have been known as John the Worst, so the phony king of England.
Right.
That's another fun little tune in the movie. Some fun memories. I had a Robin Hood toy bow and arrow, and it was like the Disney Robin Hood bow and arrow toy, so I thought that was always really cool. And it just sort of like, it was like a rubber band thing, and it stretched and shot the arrow out with like air. I don't know. But I've always enjoyed Robin Hood. It's a fun one.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed it too. It's a good one. I think it gets overlooked a lot, but it does have a fan following too. So
yeah, and Disney Animation's most recent hit, Zootopia, very much inspired by Robin Hood for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, that's Robin Hood, 1973, November 8th, 1973, and then 1977 brought us The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, March 11th, 1977. I love Winnie the Pooh.
Me
I
too.
do. All the characters, that whole world. I thought I was Christopher Robin as a kid. I was Christopher Robin, and I was Andy from Toy Story, and that was who I channeled as a kid, those characters. And then I had like all the stuffed animals for the Winnie the Pooh characters, and I had Pooh, I had Piglet, I had Tigger, I had Eeyore, I had Rabbit, I had Al, I had Kanga, I had Roo, I had them all.
Wow.
And it was just a really, really special time as a kid. So I really enjoyed Winnie the Pooh. Based on a book series by A.A. Milne, a British author there, a British book series, really. And Walt Disney, I've read that it was originally supposed to be a feature film, but then they wound up creating several shorts starting in 1968 with Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, followed by Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, and then Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. And then they put them all together to make The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which is the full-length feature film. And yeah, it's interesting that they did that and that people still kind of went to see the full feature. Maybe they had not really seen the shorts so much. I'm not sure. But I love The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. There's a great opening sequence where you see like a real-life look at Christopher Robin's bedroom, and it's really fun. I love it.
It is. Yeah, I love that one too. And I feel like most of the time when I've seen it, it's been broken up. Like they've just shown like one of the shorts on TV or something. And I definitely probably watched more of the later adaptations that Disney did as opposed to the original one growing up. But
the TV series.
Yeah. So a lot of that, and read all the stories and everything, and had like a Winnie the Pooh computer game that lets you play through different episodes with the characters. And no matter how old you are, there's just always a lot of good humor and
and clever humor too.
Exactly,
and great words of wisdom
Yeah.
from the characters. So yeah, really love me some Winnie the Pooh. We were such cool kids, Katie. You and your computer game, me and my Winnie the Pooh plush toys. So yeah. Let's see. So my favorite of the shorts in The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh would be Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. Do you have a favorite of those that are featured?
Probably Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. I feel like that one's the one that I've seen the most and like gone back and watched the most. So yeah.
The Tigger one, there was this particular scene where Rabbit tries to get rid of Tigger. They go into the woods and try to lose him. And then Rabbit, Pooh, and Piglet end up getting lost too. There's just this funny moment. I don't know why it was so funny to me as a kid, but they keep walking past this sand pit. And eventually Pooh is just like, well, if we just stop passing this old pit, and I don't know why, but just the way he said it, something about the old pit, this old pit. And I just thought that was so funny. I don't know. But there's also some fun songs in the many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. The Heffalumps and Woozles song, Love it.
Yes.
So that's a fun little dream sequence there. Oh, and the ride at Magic Kingdom, The Mini Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, a great ride.
It
A
is.
really great
It
ride.
really is. I was surprised when I
Me
first
too.
rode that, but yeah, it's a good
Well,
one.
I rode it last year and I hadn't ridden it since I was like
Yeah.
a little kid, and I was
Yeah, me
just like,
too.
wow, this is really good.
It is. It
Really good
is.
ride.
I know Winnie the Pooh, at least with this movie, was voiced by Sterling Holloway, who I brought up a lot. And I think this is kind of the character that he became most associated with. But he's, of course, been in plenty of Disney animated movies prior to this. And then this is kind of like the peak for him, I'd say. And he's kind of like the iconic voice for Winnie the Pooh now.
Yeah, and later Jim Cummings, I guess.
right.
So, yeah. One last little fun fact is that Gopher, which they feature, is not in the books. And so there's like an inside joke that they talk about, and they're just like, oh, he's not in the book or something. So, yeah, love Winnie the Pooh and the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, a fun little hit from 1977 for Disney. Also that year, on June 22nd, 1977, The Rescuers was released.
Love The Rescuers.
Yeah, a fun one that I know you really enjoy. So
Great little adventure movie. It's based on a novel by Marjorie Sharp, and basically follows all of these mice characters. So these mice have kind of a United Nations type group within the actual human United Nations headquarters, called the Rescue Aid Society, and they, go travel the world and help people. And the main heroes here are Bianca, who's kind of a more adventurous type, and then Bernard, who's less experienced but more cowardly or hesitant, I guess you could say. But they team up to go save this little girl called Penny, who has been kidnapped by Madame Medusa, and they are holding her in a bayou, and they're trying to get her to help them find this diamond. The mice receive her message for help, and they go find her.
there's this beautiful sequence at the beginning of the movie with a beautiful song called, Who Will Rescue Me? And she puts the note in a bottle as a cry for help, and then it just floats along in the water. And I love that opening sequence of the movie and that song. The story starts, you learn about the little girl, and then you learn about the mice, and then to see it sort of come together when they finally do get there to rescue her from the evil Madame Medusa, a good villain there, along with her little sidekick, Mr. Snoops. Nothing too grand or epic, but this is a really fun adventure movie that I know I enjoyed a lot as a kid. I actually saw the sequel, which we'll talk about when we record the Renaissance era, but The Rescuers Down Under. But I saw it first, and then I went back and I saw this one later, and I like it a lot better. I mean, I enjoyed the sequel, but this one's really good.
It is really good. Yeah, this is a lot better than the sequel, I think. And yeah, it's just such a fun little movie and great music. Like you were saying, one of the songs that is sung by Penny later in the film was nominated for an Academy Award. Great characters. Again, you have Eva Gabor voicing Bianca, and then Bob Newhart voices Bernard, and Albatross, I think it is, that they team up with, who's kind of like the comic relief there. And his name is Wilbur, right?
Right.
Yes.
It's on the Wright brothers.
Yes,
so
yes.
It's a take on that, because then in the sequel it's Orville. So
Right.
And yeah, I know when we recorded this earlier, you mentioned something about how they wanted to bring in Cruella de Vil as the villain for this.
Yeah, I think initially when they were talking about doing this movie, they were going to reuse Cruella de Vil as the villain here, and then ultimately decided to scrap that and go with an entirely new character. But that could have made for a really interesting and different movie for sure.
Yeah. And any more thoughts on The Rescuers?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, we will move on then to 1981, and that was when The Fox and the Hound was released, July 10th, 1981. It's the story of Todd the Fox and Copper the Hound Dog, who meet as a young fox and a young hound dog, and become the best of friends, but nature would not have it be that way as they grow older. And so it's kind of a trial and error to see how they can handle nature, interrupting their friendship. It has a great social message to it, I think, in there. So a really fun, heartwarming movie. Again, nothing too exciting, but really a nice little film.
Yeah, it is. This is one that I don't think I ever really watched too much. I mean, I did watch it some, but it was never one of my favorites. But when I talk to people about, favorite Disney movies and everything, this one seems to come up a lot as one that people really just love.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. And I know that every summer, like as soon as school was out, which I mean, I would watch Disney movies throughout the school year too. But, in the summer, you have more time. And that would always be something that I would do, was just spend my summers whenever I had time to watch Disney movies, I would. And The Fox and the Hound was the one that I always picked first for some reason. Every year, it seems like it's the last day of school, I would go home and I'd pop in Fox and the Hound, and that would be my little start to the summer. So this movie, though, was a very transitional time for Walt Disney Animation, and a lot of the nine old men who we've discussed before, they were kind of retiring as this movie was being made. And so this new generation of animators who would become legendary Disney animators were coming in to work on this. So, you had Ron Clements and John Musker, and you even had John Lasseter, and who else? Glenn Keane, was he in this one? And I think Tim Burton was even involved.
He was, yeah, for
in
a
this
little
movie.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So a transitional time and some drama went down, and this movie took a long time to get made.
It did, yeah. There was a lot of clashing between the older animators and these new ones who are coming in, as far as just disagreements about how things should be done and all that. And that did result in, some of those new people leaving, like Don Bluth, who, he left and took some animators with him and went on to found his own studio that ended up really becoming a big rival for Disney throughout this time. And it was really the first time that another studio started making animated feature films that were about the same quality that Disney was making.
We're talking American Tail, Land Before Time, Anastasia, right?
Yeah, Secrets of Nim, yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But then since they left, then they also had to, hire new people to replace them. And then those new people didn't really know how to do things or what was going on. And it just really made this movie a lot harder to get made. But it did eventually, and it is a nice film.
And the nine old men still had their touch, on it, even though most of them sort of retired as this was being made. One did stick it out all the way through, which was Wolfgang.
Yes. Really big names in the voice cast. You have, as adult Todd and Copper, Mickey Rooney, and then Kurt Russell, who was a big child star for Disney with their live-action movies kind of beginning in the 60s. He was in so many Disney films as a child and then as a teenager, so kind of cool to see him come back for this as an adult. And then Pearl Bailey plays Big Mama. So she did a great job with that character as well.
Love the song that she sings, When You're the Best of Friends. That's a great one. And then also I enjoy the elimination, lack of education. I love that one too. So really just a fun, heartwarming movie, although there's a great action scene at the end that's really cool.
Yeah, really well animated.
I'm trying to think of the little quote where it's like, Copper, you're my very best friend.
Oh, yeah.
And you're mine too, Todd. And we'll always be friends forever. Yeah, forever. Ugh. If that doesn't just like warm your heart, I don't know what does. But anyway, we will move on now to the next movie. And oh man, so this whole era is kind of a low point in Disney animation history, but this next movie is probably considered the lowest, and it's July 24th, 1985 marked the release of The Black Cauldron. Yikes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really just, it doesn't even feel like a Disney movie.
No, it doesn't.
It's so dark and just not, there's really not a lot to like about it in terms of story or the characters, really.
And I haven't seen it in so long, and I know that it kind of, I guess, has a cult following, and I'm sure there are some people who enjoy it. I know I never really enjoyed it too much as a kid, so I would have to go back and watch it to really say, how good or how bad it is, because, you don't hear many great things.
I know it's based off of a fantasy book series that's spans multiple books, has tons and tons of characters. So I think, that in and of itself makes it really, really hard to adapt to an under 2-hour animated film. And then, of course, still have it be a family movie, which this movie is
not at all.
Not a kid's movie at all. I mean, you've got the villain, the Horn King, who is so terrifying.
I don't even want to think about it. Like, I'm pretty sure that might have scarred me as a kid, and it was one of those things that you just think about, and probably late at night as a kid, and you just can't get that image out of your head. Ugh. And it was the first Disney movie or animated movie to get a PG rating, deservedly so.
Yeah, I mean, even after they had cut, I think, 10 minutes or so worth of footage that was deemed too scary when they tested it with audience, they cut that out, and it was still just, ugh.
Do you have anything to say about the storyline that you remember, or?
Not too much. I know that the story involves these characters. You have Taran, who is a pig keeper, and he meets up with some other characters like a princess named Eluani, and they're trying to stop the Horned King from finding this magic cauldron that somehow is going to give him the power to take over the world. So
critics hated this movie. Audiences did not really care for it either. And I guess now is a good time to sort of jump into referencing. There's a documentary called Waking Sleeping Beauty, which we will talk about starting now in this episode, but we'll talk about it more in the Disney Renaissance episode 2. But the documentary Waking Sleeping Beauty really documents the Disney Renaissance era and the animators who were working at Walt Disney Animation from 1984 to 1994 is the 10 years that the movie talks about. That would have been right as this movie was being made and about to be released. And so you had this total shift in administration. You had a new CEO, you had a new president, because Walt's son-in-law, Ron Miller, stepped down from the company as CEO. And so they brought in from Paramount for CEO, they brought in Michael Eisner. And then from Warner Brothers, I believe, they brought in Frank Wells for president. And then Eisner, to look over the film division, brought in Jeffrey Katzenberg. And then Roy E. Disney was still working over the animation department. But Katzenberg was not happy about this movie. I know he came in and just, said, we've got to fix this, something's wrong here, we've got to edit this movie a lot. And it still turned out to be sort of a flop. And the documentary points out that year, 1985, The Black Cauldron, as far as animated movies released that year, got beat out at the box office by the Care Bears movie. And that is just sad. That is sad.
This film is kind of important, I guess, technically speaking, in that it's the first of their animated movies to incorporate computer-generated elements. So in some of the effects, not like the characters or anything, but as far as lighting or, some of the magic effects that they use in the film, they used computer-generated imagery for that. So
yeah.
That's kind of
I think the first
cool.
time we recorded this, you mentioned something about the bubbles.
Yeah.
My memory about the movie is that on the home video we have of my 3rd birthday party, I think, which I haven't watched in so long, but I remember that somebody gave me the Black Cauldron VHS, and I was so excited about it. Like, I opened it up and I'm like, the Black Cauldron, yay! And yet it was not something to be too excited about. So we'll move on now and sort of head back uphill for Walt Disney Animation, starting in 1986 with The Great Mouse Detective, released July 2nd, 1986. So it just celebrated its 30th anniversary, and I watched it the day of its anniversary, actually. So, and I know you're a big fan of this movie, so I'll let you kind of start in on it.
Yeah, I love this one. So this is based on a novel called Basil of Baker Street, which in turn is inspired by the Sherlock Holmes stories. So this is another movie that centers around mice characters. You've got Basil, who is the Sherlock Holmes type detective. Dr. Dawson is his Watson. And they team up to help this little girl rescue her father, who is a toy maker who has been kidnapped by Professor Ratigan, who wants him to help him make a lifelike model of the queen of the mice, so that they can swap them out, and he can, kidnap the queen and then use this toy to kind of, impersonate her and then take over, I guess, the country. So yeah, that's kind of the little adventure that they go on.
Yeah, it takes place in London, or in England, and so it's basically like the mice have a reflective world of English society, having their own queen who lives under, Buckingham Palace, I believe, is what I remember seeing there in the film. And you pointed out, I think the last time we recorded this, that Basil supposedly lives under the home of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, so that's kind of implied in the movie. They actually used some audio from a Sherlock Holmes radio episode in the 60s as the voice of the human Sherlock Holmes here. And they used the voice of Basil Rathbone, who is most well known for playing Sherlock Holmes in films throughout the 30s and 40s, and then did some radio serials in the 60s. So they used some audio from that, which is cool. And really just the whole film is like this great homage to the Sherlock Holmes stories. There are so many great little references. I know a lot of people who are fans of Sherlock Holmes. They're sometimes kind of particular about different adaptations of it, but I just see nothing but love for this movie from people. Yeah, I mean, it's great if you're a fan of that, but even if you're not, it's still just a really fun movie on its own.
And there is a great scene at the end where they integrate CGI, a really big moment towards like the climax of the movie, which is where Basil and Ratigan and Jenny is the little girl mouse. Her name is Jenny, and they are in Big Ben, the clock in London. And so the CGI is just amazing in that scene, and it was one of the first times that they had really used CGI there.
It's really impressive. I think that they were initially going to have that scene take place like outside of the clock, and then one of the animators was like, "Hey, let's do this inside instead, and then we can have all this interaction with the gears and everything." So that ended up being a really effective move for that scene, and it's amazing. It still holds up.
Yeah, that scene alone is just kind of breathtaking there. Fun characters. There's a few fun songs in there. Nothing too memorable as far as music goes, but this movie is kind of one of those underrated ones. It gets overlooked, I would say, but I don't remember watching it a lot growing up, and then I just watched it recently for the 30th anniversary. Just decided to have a little movie night there, so...
Yeah, and it's kind of become a little favorite of mine for sure. And one of my favorite actors, Vincent Price, voices the Moriarty-type villain, Professor Ratigan, and he just does such a great job. And I do remember hearing something about how Disney had approached him for this role and asked him to audition for it. And of course, this is, iconic Vincent Price, who has 50 years of film experience under his belt. And he was like, well, if anyone but Disney had asked me to audition, probably would have said no. But he did it, and I think he ended up really, being happy with the experience of being in a Disney film.
Clever, fun, good little mystery, and a fun little adventure movie. But again, nothing too epic or exciting. Again, this whole era is just kind of B movies. But we are on the uptake here. We're almost done with this era, actually, because there's only one film left, and that would be November 18th, 1988. Oliver and Company was released. And this is a fun one for sure. It is a twist on Oliver Twist. And so the orphan here is Oliver. It's a kitten, really cute kitten there, and takes place in New York City. And so Oliver befriends this stray dog of sorts named Dodger. Oliver hangs out with Dodger and his crew, but then also gets picked up by a wealthy little girl, or her family is wealthy. So he kind of gets to live the wealthy life with this little girl. Her name's Penny. And then he also gets to live the street life with Dodger and the gang. And fun characters, fun music, and a really fun story. And I really enjoy Oliver and Company a lot. And it was kind of a huge success for Disney at the time, and sort of a sign, Great Mouse Detective was a pretty big critical hit and commercial hit. Oliver and Company, kind of topped that just a little bit. So it was kind of like we're headed in the right direction. And then, of course, as we head into the next era of movies we discuss is when we hit the big time, so to say. But yeah, Oliver and Company. Any thoughts?
I know this, I think, is kind of the first movie where they really went with a more contemporary pop soundtrack for the songs there, and then really big all-star cast as well.
Yeah, so this was kind of the first movie that Howard Ashman was involved in, and we'll talk about him some more when we get to the next era and Little Mermaid and all of those. But great songs with Why Should I Worry? Love that song. That's a great song. And then there's another little song in the movie that Penny sings, which is called Good Company. And that song just makes me so emotional. I don't know why, but it's really good. And as far as the all-star cast that you were mentioning, you've got Billy Joel as Dodger. You've got Bette Midler. She voices a poodle named Georgette. And you've got, Cheech from Cheech and Chong. He voices a little chihuahua and named Tito. And but yeah, one of the first times that they had an all-star cast in a Disney movie, which now is kind of a regular thing, but back then it really wasn't. You didn't have a lot of big name stars like that in Disney movies. So
yeah.
Also, Oliver is voiced by a young Joey Lawrence, so that's kind of fun to note.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoy Oliver and Company. I watched it some as a kid, not too much. And then I remember as I was a little older, probably like middle school, I was on a vacation in North Carolina with some friends. And the house we were staying at just happened to have a copy of Oliver and Company in it. So we watched it one night, and it was just like, oh my goodness, I love this movie. I forgot how good it was. And so yeah, I really like Oliver and Company. And now I have it on Blu-ray, so I watch it when I want to.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that one for sure.
Yeah, you should. It's really fun. Okay, well, I believe that does it for this era. That went by really fast. But yeah, any other thoughts on this era? Kind of just a slump. But at the same time, these movies still mean a lot.
They do. I mean, this is probably, even though these films aren't the best or most memorable Disney films, they are, I think, in a way, the most interesting ones in terms of the stories that they were choosing to adapt at this time, the methods that they were using as, the technology was changing, and then, of course, all the staff changes and bringing in new talent and seeing that kind of start to develop. It's definitely, it's interesting. For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening to our Bronze Age episode of this podcast series we're doing on the history of Disney animation. And stay tuned. Next week, we will get to the Disney Renaissance. So exciting. Can't wait for that one. If you have not checked out our other 2 episodes, go back and listen to the Silver Age and the Golden Age. And hey, if you are binge listening, just keep on listening through. Keep on going. And Katie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course, always a pleasure. Be sure to check out mine and Katie's social media links in the description below. And be sure to follow at Disney_connected on Instagram for more Diz connected content. And until next time, have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon, folks.